actually say that people are still trying to get to the basics of like, is this someone we want to work with? Lead scoring, lead like qualification, ICP, not even to the point of this is a good customer who's done XYZ, who will likely do this. And so for most of us, and like Clearbit is still in the early stages of the lead scoring and the product qualified lead MQL. What is your advice for companies trying to figure out that can of worms?
Yeah, you're right. We live in a really interesting time where there's actually a lot to learn from high scale consumer companies as B2B companies, right? Like there's actually a treasure trove of knowledge in the, let's call it Facebook, TikTok, all the way down to, kind of direct to consumer e-commerce stuff, because they're forced to deal with low margins, high number of users. And so every little bit that you can do this better is like high impact. And in B2B, we're still learning that game, and we're all early in our journey towards serving many millions of users, but everyone's kind of getting there, Clearbit included. So my advice is twofold. First, I will 100% second what you said, which is you should start small. People get way too enamored with, let's use AI to predict which customers we should email what coupon, right? Like that is overkill for 95% of people who are just trying to kind of do more with their data. I think what's much more important is to build a system that you can iterate on. And I think if there's one thing I'm trying to convey to people in the data community is the engineering world learned this many, many years ago, right? When we moved to software as a service, especially, the thing that differentiated those companies from traditional companies that made software on a CD or on a diskette, which is where I started my career at Microsoft, was the iteration time, right? You could ship something and then the same day or the next day or within an hour, you could see the effect and then change your decision and ship again. And I think data teams need to think the same way. So when it comes to something like lead scoring, like you can paint a huge vision, right? Where we have millions of free users and like obviously the sales team can't contact them all, and we should be very precise. We should extract the exact 1% of these users who are super qualified based on like 42 dimensions, and like we should run some ML to figure that out. That's all well and good, but you could start by saying, let's just create a filter for the top 1% of users by the dumbest metric, like number of sessions they use the product. Doesn't matter. And create the system that pushes that into the sales team so that it generates the leads. And now you have a baseline that you can move, like that you can upgrade from. And the thing to create in your company is the culture and the technology to iterate. So what does that mean? That means like be relatively comfortable with trying different email campaigns every month or so, or maybe try to start with a very dumb email campaign, but to a small group of users, and try different, segmentation of users to try different email campaigns just to see what kind of works. And same for the sales team. Maybe you generate a filter that's very coarse grained to generate leads off your product usage, but you do it with like 0.1% of your users. You see how that converts, and you expand the window whilst changing the algorithm. And then you can start to, and then you get the buy-in, right? And you'll be able to invest in ML and invest in all sorts of fun things. And you'll know the ROI. Because I can pitch you on an amazing ROI for an AI that scores leads. But if your current state is we don't do anything with our leads except for the ones that magically kind of call in for a demo, then you have no baseline. And I could pitch you anything and you could pay anything. What if you have a basic implementation of, let's call it a lead scoring process, and then you at least have something to measure your gains against. And so that's probably my number one piece of advice is you can start really small. One of the people I worked with, funny enough, this used to be their office. This is like a weird fluke of San Francisco startup life where you end up in people's offices. The first thing they ever did with our software, which was one of the things they were struggling with, was prioritizing support tickets. And again, you can write a lot of AI, a lot of rules. You can create a lot of ways to do that. You can create like 3 levels of VIP. You could say like there's the really, really important users, and then there's like medium important, and you could do all that. Instead, they just started with a yes, no. They created a Boolean. It was like, are you VIP? Are you not? And there were like 4 signals that went into it. It was a single query. I think it was probably 10 lines of SQL that like, anyone with modicum of data skills could write. And that was enough to move the ball forward dramatically. And then you can improve on that over the years, right? So that's probably my number one piece of feedback. And then my, the thing I would emphasize that this has to go hand in hand with is this culture of iteration. So it's like, if you start small, it's only good if you understand that that's a starting point, and that what you're really trying to do as a team and as a company is embrace change, embrace failure, right? That's usually scares people. Traditionally, people in the data world are, they're writing a report about revenue, and the CFO is going to look at it, and you can't screw that up, right? Like, that's a very important thing to just get very, very right. But what we're talking about here is about agility and iteration on something that you can't even define as correct. Like, what is the correct lead score? Nobody knows. There's no answer to that. And so what matters is that you're always improving, that you measure the ROI, and that you embrace a culture of constant change. And I think if you're doing that, you're in literally the top percentile. Like you're probably in the 99th percentile kind of companies, especially if you embrace that things can fail. That's probably the biggest thing that I would recommend.